Warning, this video contains images of headless child mannequins and Devious Diesel hanging out with Minnie Mouse. Viewer discretion is highly advised. Well, hi there, this is a bit of a different video from me. This is my study of the Thomas and Friends stock in a place called Chatswood, which is in Sydney, Australia. It's a ritzy retail area of Sydney, and it's also a part of town where I grew up. Now, what makes this toy hunting video a little bit different is I take a look at some of the stock at a 6-month split. And what's curious about this split is one piece of footage was done prior to my McDonald's diet and the other footage was done after the McDonald's diet. So you'll sort of see the fat hand and the skinny hand all in one video. And this video is a very delayed upload on YouTube because I've had all sorts of problems which have finally been fixed. I hope you enjoy the video. And that building there was my primary school down at Chatswood a long time ago, and Chatswood has really changed compared to what it was many years ago. These days, people from Hong Kong love to live there, and it's a fantastic place to get some really interesting and nice Asian food. And that building there used to be a cinema. It's actually the place where I saw my first film, but these days it's a chemist, or some people may call it a drugstore. And looking up the street here, it looks vastly different to what I remember as a boy. There is one shopfront here which really hasn't changed. The owner has changed, but the look of the building hasn't changed. And there used to be a pet store in here, and the mystery to me was the lady who used to be in there never seemed to change. Where this pet store used to be was one of the last of the old shopkeepers to leave Chatswood. Well, our first stop is Kmart Australia. And it used to be a fantastic place to get both Thomas and Friends and Chuggington toys, but it's a very different story today. The Thomas and Friends stock has been reduced down to one cell. It used to take up half an aisle. I didn't see much difference in what was on the shelves between the 6-month split of me visiting the same store, but I do remember when Kmart used to stock a lot of Trackmaster stock, and it used to stock a whole ton of Chuggington toys as well. From what I could see, Kmart really led the way in reducing the amount of Thomas stock on the shelves. But what you will find at Kmart these days is lots and lots of generic toys. If you're after a very inexpensive wooden railway set, it's the place to go. In fact, if you're after a very inexpensive anything, it's the ultimate place to go. But just don't expect to find the selection and brands that you used to find in Kmart back in the glory days of the 70s and 80s. And I'm old enough to remember when Kmart Australia used to have cafeterias inside, and sports sections with guns, and hardware areas that mixed paint. The list could go on and on and on. Our next stop is Target Australia. Target tends to have a pretty good selection of Thomas and Friends toys, but well-stocked shelves can be difficult to find at certain times of the year. Target's pricing tends to be a bit higher than Kmart, but they do have 20% off sales during the year. I'm a very regular shopper at Target, and I have found their pricing to be fairly erratic at the best of times, particularly in the toy aisles. You can also find some Chuggington toys there, but I'll be quite honest here, the selection was very poor, and I would say Chuggington will not be on the shelves in the near future. It's sort of sad because I really thought Chuggington presented some very good toys to the market. 6 months on in Target, and the Frozen DVDs were very popular. In fact, they were all sold out. And a basic Hot Wheels car, standard price, that hit $2.50. Mind you, every now and then Target do 5 cars for $5 specials, so keep an eye out for those. But be careful, at Coles Australia, a standard Hot Wheels car has gone to $3. And the real conundrum here is, at the time of making this video, Kmart, Target and Coles are all owned by the same company. Anyway, to get onto the Thomas stock, it was moved to a new aisle, and it looked like the last of the classic Trackmaster stock was put on the shelves. Little did we know at this time that the new Trackmaster 2 was going to appear in a few months' time. Overall, the selection looked fairly similar to what I saw 6 months earlier. Although what's curious is I see one playset on the shelves here which has had a huge spike in price, even though it's a bit of a older playset. I wonder what's going on there. Poor old Chuggington was still hanging in there, and I really feel the downfall of this toy was a very poor track system on the first diecast series of playsets, and also those first diecast series toys didn't have magnetic couplings. If you couldn't connect to Thomas trains, well, you were never ever going to be part of the railway system. One thing that did disturb me, I did notice Devious Diesel was hanging out with Minnie Mouse, and that can only mean trouble. Our next retailer is David Jones, and David Jones, for those who don't know, is the sort of place you go to find some very good brand names, and it's usually wrapped up with some pretty good service as well. In the toy department, Thomas had his own little train in the Chatswood store, and it was always the sort of place to go and find some quality Thomas Wooden Railway stock. And sure, I suppose you can connect the Thomas Wooden Railway as being the quality sort of toy in the Thomas and Friends franchise. And quality shopping is something that David Jones likes to adhere to. Mind you, it's also the place where I find the very good and inexpensive Dickie toys. 6 months on, and we're still in David Jones at the same store, and it's a very different story. It looks like that display Thomas the Tank has been taken over by a whole bunch of other toys. The actual Thomas stock is very low indeed. In fact, it looks like it hasn't been replenished since I last looked at the pegs holding the Thomas Wooden Railway stock. But seeing near empty shelves and near empty pegs is something that I'm very accustomed to when looking for Thomas and Friends toys. And from all the retail shops I go to, I see less and less stock and less area which is displaying the Thomas and Friends stock. Surely this is a Thomas and Friends mystery. Our next retailer is Meijer, and I'm a bit of a fan of Meijer. The people up at the Hornsby Meijer store know me quite well in the toy department, especially Shane up there. And down in the Chatswood store, which we're looking at the moment, the whole toy section got moved and reformatted to a different area. So this is a bit of a tricky one to look at. But what you can see is a great selection and choice of Thomas and Friends stock, and there's also some Chuggington stock in here as well. But you can also notice there are some pegs here that are looking very empty and some shelves that aren't really that full. The saying I have is there tends to be lots of the things that you don't really need and very few of the ones that you desire. The way I'll explain Meijer is it'll often have stock that Kmart and Target don't have on the shelves. Ooh, and 6 months on, I revisit the Chatswood Meijer store, and the whole toy department has moved to another section, and the Thomas and Friends area has been reformatted. To me, it seems a bit smaller. Maybe it's taller, but maybe looking at the stock there, I can see a great selection of toys, but I'm not seeing pegs that are completely loaded or shelves that have stacked up to the hilt. You know, it's funny, there is actually a fairly good selection here, but at my local Meijer store, the Thomas and Friends stock has wilted down to almost zero. And what is very curious on this revisit, Chuggington has been reduced to only a few items. It looks like the chuggers are out the door. Nevertheless, if Meijer is well stocked, it tends to have a fairly good selection of Thomas and Friends toys at a price. And now I've looked around, and what is missing is where are the Trackmaster sets. Mind you, this is a couple of months prior to Trackmaster 2 being released. And what caught my boys' attention here was there were some Thomas trains right up high in the shelves, right near those headless child mannequins. And it's sort of funny because one of those headless mannequins was the main feature in the Thomas area when I was here 6 months ago. And it looks like the witness to all this madness was Devious Diesel. He was on the shelf there, looking over the Thomas area, and I bet you if he could talk, he could tell us some grand old stories. Our final stop is Toys R Us Australia. Best way to describe it, it's like a watered down version of Toys R Us in the USA. Toys R Us Australia was the fantastic place to go to find the Chuggington stock. It was like the last home that Chuggington was really seen on a grand scale. Who knows, this may change in the future. Chuggington might appear in all the shops all of a sudden, but I got a funny feeling that's not going to happen. One aspect of Toys R Us is you tend to pay a premium price, but you also get some fantastic exclusive playsets and toys that you will not find in other retailers. With Toys R Us, I found some of the more interesting toys that I presented to YouTube at their stores. I've also gone in there when there's been specials on, and when there's a toy which has basically come to the end of its life and it's no longer a popular toy, Toys R Us tend to have some very good specials on. Toys R Us was also a great place to find all sorts of different Thomas stock, but again, the selection of stock and the amount of stock could be fairly limited. There seemed to be some sort of choke on the supply of Thomas items to the Australian market. And sadly for me, the Toys R Us at Chatswood is a little bit too far away for me to get to be a regular visit. And in Toys R Us, apart from finding a fairly premium range of Thomas and Friends items, I could also find some fairly interesting Thomas and Friends merchandise. It was the place I found the giant Thomas the Tank pillow pet, and some other curious and fairly interesting toys. And 6 months on, I go back to the same store. You know the story, how it works in this video. And to my surprise, or not really my surprise, the Chuggington stock had been shifted to the other side of the shelves, and in its place were the Imaginarium train toys. And I've got a funny feeling the Imaginarium brand is a bit of an in-house brand that you see in Toys R Us. And the Chuggington stock which was there was fairly limited, it's obvious. A lot of the wooden has gone, some of the die-cast is still there, and the play sets were now the new style of play set that were being made by Tomy. But this was the place where Chuggington used to rule. This was the place where you could find all sorts of different Chuggington toys. That really seems to have changed, and the selection is far less than what it was 6 months ago with the Chuggington toys. And like I said earlier in this video, I had no problem at all with what Chuggington were presenting to the market. In fact, I thought in many ways it was superior to the Thomas and Friends toys. So let's be reminded Imaginarium now sits where Chuggington used to, and to even enforce this even further, there was a fantastic wooden railway layout made up of Imaginarium stock. And didn't my boy love looking at those trains? And even I was impressed as well. And as we take a look at the Thomas and Friends aisle, in a funny way it really wasn't that different to what I saw before, but as you can see, and I'm not at all surprised, a lot of the pegs are looking fairly thin in stock. In fact, even to today, as I'm making this video, to try and find a good stock of TakeNPlay Thomas toys is almost impossible in Sydney, Australia. And it does really make me wonder, is this happening worldwide, or is it something peculiar to the country where I live? I'm absolutely sure my audience is going to tell me. Maybe the disappearance of the TakeNPlay stock was due to the fact that Mattel were actually redesigning a lot of these toy trains. And as we now learn, there are some radical design changes going on. There are actually quite a few of the Trackmaster sets that I purchased here, but I never presented them to YouTube. The funny thing is now with Trackmaster 2, it might be curious to take a look at the last of the classic Trackmaster playsets versus what Mattel is offering up as Trackmaster 2. So maybe to summarise this video, and it was a tricky video to make, it took a long time to make this video, it sat on the computer in pieces for many months, and it's one of these peculiar videos because it's the sort of thing that I like to make, but quite often it's something that the audience don't like to watch. But I'm pretty sure there'll be many people out there with stories on how the Thomas and Friends empire seems to be shrinking. Thinking back to some of my first YouTube videos, especially when I compared Chuggington toys to Thomas and Friends toys, used to see them basically occupy equal area in most of the retail stores in Australia. As you can see via this video, that's no longer the case. Well, one lesson I taught myself in making this video is possibly the way to find Thomas items these days is to shop online. And who knows, that might be the secret message that retailers in Australia are sending to me. Just take a look at the Kmart model, pack your stores with cheap stuff, get rid of the expensive stuff, and you'll be on a profiteering bonanza. Anything niche or specialty is far better off being sold online. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. In years to come, you can come along and have a reminder of the Thomas items that used to be on the shelves. And as always, you know what I'm about to say. Thanks for watching and bye for now. Let's tack on a bit extra and let's answer some questions that I'm often asked. In Toys R Us, I have seen what is the new Quitter G-Scale train. It's a different branding here, but it's the same train as the one I've got. I wouldn't be paying any more than the low price here. Take a look at the high price on the ticket that I showed you in the store here. It's a great remote controlled G-Scale train, and it'll give you the taste of what G-Scale is about before you go in and spend the big bucks and do it properly. I think you're better off spending the $200 here rather than mucking around with those LL cheapo G-Scale trains. And I'm referring to the EasyTech train, the Black Canyon Express. As I said in the start of the video, Chatswood has become a bit of an Asian shopping mecca. Lots of Asian shops there, and what's good about that is they tend to have the Tomy capsule toys, and of course the Thomas ones are there. In fact, these capsule toys are also at Toys R Us at Chatswood, and there is also in the Asian stores there, and it's the one near Daiso, those very elusive Thomas and Friends lollies that everyone seems to want, and the faces on these will fit over your Trackmaster and Tomy trains. Yeah! And because of the Hong Kong Chinese influence there, there's also a few amazing clone knockoff toy shops which are packed with so much knockoff stuff, it's not funny. And what I may do is pull a special separate video showing you inside one of these stores. It's a real eye-opener. Well, I'm at Chatswood Chase, and what's interesting about Chatswood Chase is there used to be one of the shops that I bought a lot of knockoff stuff at. That shop used to be there. It's now gone, so I wonder if it's been cleaned out by Department of Fair Trading. It's time for Boost! Oh yeah, and the Boost shop down here. Chatswood, you got blenders. Oh yeah! I like it. I've been trying to get one of these, but these are deadly expensive in Australia. Deadly expensive.